everyone. I'm Jack Hetherington, Director of Used and Vintage for Guitar Center. And today I'm at the Hollywood Vintage Room, where I started my career with Guitar Center a couple of decades ago. And we're going to talk about how to buy a vintage Stratocaster. There's definitely a reason it's the most iconic guitar in the history of electric guitars. You may be looking for a collector-grade instrument. You may want to buy something that might have been refinished or has changed pickups that you're going to play on stage every week. We're going to go through some of the things you need to look for when you're making that decision. So behind me, we have 3 Fender Stratocasters that are all amazing, but they differ a little bit from when they left the factory in Fullerton, California back in the day. So here we have a truly amazing Stratocaster. I mean, it just looks incredible. At first glance, this looks like a fairly complete early 1960s to mid 1960s Stratocaster. The finish is awesome. It jumps. The wear is just spectacular. The neck looks killer. Pickups look good. They have staggered pole pieces. It's got a green guard, so that refers to the kind of slightly greenish color coming off of that pick guard there. It's got a 3-way switch, which is good. Didn't go to a 5-way until the 70s. Knobs look good. It's got clay dots. That looks right for the era. So it looks like this neck probably lived with this body for the life of the guitar up until today. I look at the tuners and I go, 5 of the 6 look like early 60s tuners to me. It's got the correct neck plate with the appropriate serial number. And for the most part, it looks like a guitar that's had some work done on it, but it's not the finish that went out with the guitar when it left the factory. This is a refinished guitar. Just from looking at it, I can kind of tell that. Pretty obviously not original to my eyes, but I wouldn't make that decision on my own. I'd bounce it off some of the people that I work with, and we get to the point where we are confident that we know what it is and that we can actually purchase the guitar and put it on the floor for someone to come in and check out. Let's take a look at another one. So here we have a 1950 Stratocaster that has some more obvious changes than the one we just looked at from the 1960s. The first being the finish. This finish is definitely not something that Fender would have applied to this guitar back in the proverbial day. That said, it looks to be the appropriate wood. It's an ash body, which is correct for this era. The guard, to my eyes, though being a single-ply white parchment guard, doesn't look like an original guard to me. The neck is a maple neck, correct for the era. Definitely something going on with the decal up there. And it looks like the neck has probably been resprayed at some point and maybe refretted as well. The tuners look good. Single line cloisons, correct for the era. The back may not have been resprayed, but again, something I'm going to get a second opinion on for sure. Plate looks good. Serial number is correct for the era. This back plate also looks okay. So a really cool guitar, maybe not something we would consider a collector grade instrument, but still a very valuable and cool guitar. And in a bit, we're going to get into what's on the inside of a Stratocaster that helps you determine what's going on with it. Before we get into our last example, just wanted to talk about these guitars and Fender Stratocasters in general. The one we just looked at is almost 70 years old. And it's amazing to me that we still have guitars that are that old and older walk into our stores that are completely 100% original. One of the great things about Stratocasters was that you could change things out on it. If something broke on the road, you could get it fixed and you could get back up on stage. All right, we're going to look at one more guitar up here on the stage, and we're moving into the later 60s, what's also known as the CBS era of Fender and Fender Stratocasters. Again, in looking at it, my eyes immediately go, okay, well, it looks pretty complete. The neck looks good. It's got the larger headstock that they moved to. In the later 60s, it's got the plastic dots on the fretboard. Looks like it's still got a nice hunk of Brazilian rosewood on there. You'll often see on these guitars a lighter red on the front of the body than on the back, which is true for this guitar, which helps us determine if it's the correct finish. The one thing that's obviously changed on this guitar is the pickguard. This is a single-ply parchment guard. This should be a 3-ply pickguard. It's a single-ply pickguard. It also has a 5-way switch. Should be a 3-way switch in 1969. Otherwise, it looks good. From the outside looking in, this looks to be a pretty complete CBS-era Fender Stratocaster. Might have a couple of things that were changed that are fairly obvious, but what we need to do now is actually get into this guitar, take it apart, and see what the inside of it can tell us about its age. Okay, so here we are. We're going to be taking a look at this guitar in front of me here, the Stratocaster. And first off, I'd like to introduce a couple of my colleagues here at Guitar Center. To my right is David Maddux, legendary guitar tech who worked at Fender for 43 years. Yes, 43 years. Pleasure to have him with us. And a very old friend of mine, Eric Bradley, who is our artist relations manager here at the Hollywood store. So what do we have here? On the face of it, it looks like a late 60s CBS era, probably 68, 69 Fender Stratocaster. And there are a couple things that look like they probably didn't leave the factory with. We're going to figure that out in a second. But the first thing we have to do is we need to see how the thing sounds and make sure the electronics work. That's job one. I'm going to hand that over to Eric Bradley to give us a hand.
Thanks, Jack.
What are you playing there?
Well, I'm going to plug this beautiful vintage Stratocaster. I've got a little mini tube screamer in the back, plugging into this Princeton Reverb reissue. And turn this up to about between 3 and 4. Oh, we've got a 5-way switch added, so that was definitely not stock to the guitar, but offers a lot of tonal options. One of the coolest things about Fender Strats when I picked them up, vintage ones, how the lacquer on the back of the neck was so thin when they put it on that you can tell this guitar had some miles on the neck. You could see how it's faded off, and you can feel it. That's one of the coolest things about vintage Strats. You can also tell right off the bat this guitar, because of that, the miles on it, you can tell it's been refretted. Feels great now with the new frets. Nice. New nut, probably. It's generally when they refret a guitar, but new nut on it. And I think, like you had mentioned before, something suspect about this pick guard for 68, 69.
Yeah.
No way.
And the 5-way switch.
5-way switch.
Which is cool at the end of the day. Gives you a lot more tonal options.
I just want to see what the body shape is under the pick guard.
Sure. Yeah.
As Eric mentioned, there are a couple of things going on that we need to dive into a bit further. Parts that are probably not original to the guitar when it left the factory, the pick guard, the 5-way switch. I noticed that the serial number on the back plate, on the neck plate, is probably not right for the era that we believe this guitar to be. So the next thing we need to do is look inside this guitar. We need to look at the neck date. We'll show you what that is. There are potentiometer codes on the electronics that can help us date it, hopefully. And in order to do that, we're going to kick it over to Dave to take a look at this thing. So David, how does that happen?
Okay, first thing I do is I like to put a capo on to hold the strings in place, and then flip it over, and we'll loosen all the screws and hold the neck on. I take out 3. And the last one, I'll hold it in a different position. So, 2. Now this one.
You take out that 4th one
Take out
separate because to
this way I
less
can.
stress.
Well, no, this way I can hold the guitar in this position to pull this one out so that I can take the neck off. I don't want the neck to pop up
Got it. Okay.
when I'm laying it on the bench there. So then I just pull this off like that. So there, you can see there's a couple of inspection stamps inside the neck pocket. Then there's the date on the end of the neck. So this is 22nd February '69. This is from the late '60s. Before they rubber stamp the date, they used to pencil them. And the person who does that date is the person who does the final sanding on the neck. And they do this date stamp on the bottom of it and send it off to the paint room to be painted.
So far, looks pretty good as far as it dating to 1969, which was basically what we thought it was going to be.
Yes, yeah. So the pick guard is the one it's the wrong. Okay, so that's that one.
Yeah, pickguard looks consistent of what a 50s guitar would be.
So the correct pick guard for this era would be a 3-ply white, black, white pick guard. So certainly this is not the correct
No.
pick guard for the guitar. I would note that what you're doing is you're putting those screws on a piece of tape over there in order of how you're taking them out, and that's so that you can put them back in.
Put them back the
correct order.
same.
Is that right?
Same order.
How many times do you think you've done this, David?
I was wondering that myself.
Probably 100,000 times.
Probably.
We used to build. We used to have to build Stratocasters. We used to do 6 an hour.
6 an hour.
6 per hour. So you had 28 per day.
Wow. And back in the day, you had 5 or 6 screws, and that eventually got up to about 13 by the 70s and 80s rolling around.
So.
Okay. So we've freed that up.
Okay, so it is a 60s body. It has this little bump right here, makes it a 60s. Also, it has this SB stamp. That means that this body was determined to be a sunburst quality body in the mill. Before it ever got to paint, they decided this was going to be sunburst because sunburst quality bodies have to be better because you can see the grain through the paint. Solid color doesn't matter. You can paint it. And that's why if you mess up a sunburst body, they used to paint them black. That's why you get vintage guitars that have worn through and you see another color underneath because they painted solid color. They're hiding something that, maybe somebody screwed up or scratched it or whatever and they paint over it.
So they're hiding that grain, or there may have been it's just not as high quality wood that would get
visually.
Right, visually, yeah. So the sunburst guitars always have the better quality wood.
Got it.
So you can see on the grain quality on the back how clear it is. You don't see any seam lines, any of that kind of stuff.
So we talked about the switch, David. That is clearly not an early three-way switch.
No, this is an Oaks Grigsby switch. It's not a Central Lab switch. Central Lab switches have the little spring. The Oaks Grigsby switch have this little disc.
So in our determining what this guitar is or what we think it is, and it's really hard with 100%, you just can't say this is 100% this or 100% that. We just get as close to the pin as we possibly can using a lot of opinions and a lot of experience. So we've got a 5-way switch, not original to the guitar, and we know that the pick guard, we know the single ply parchment vinyl guard is not correct for the Era. The pickups to me look correct, and the tape that holds the wires together looks good. The potentiometers look good. We're going to look for a code there in a second. What do you think about that? So
This all looks correct. I mean, it looks like the correct period looking pots. The capacitor looks correct. The pickups look like normal pickups. You can see the black bobbin pickups. The color of the wire looks like the darker
the
brown.
wires that are actually wrapped around the pole pieces.
Yeah, it looks like it's the darker brown wire that they used.
So the wire looks good.
Yeah.
But what about the codes on the pots themselves? How would we look at that to help us
put my
further authenticate the
specs
guitar?
on here?
So what I'm referring to, these are potentiometers. They basically turn up and down the volume and tone, and they're stamped with an OEM code, an original equipment manufacturer code, that will actually give you the date via the week and the year. Okay, David, so what are the codes on the pots?
304723.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So I thought that this was probably going to have a replaced pick guard. The pickups were going to be 69. Actually, what I think we're looking at, and you guys help me out with this, is an original 1957 wiring harness pickups and guard. The black bottom bobbins make sense.
Yep.
The codes point to 1957, the 23rd week of 57. The capacitor is correct for a late 1950s Stratocaster, the way that it's taped. Everything about this, including the pickguard now, and this is a metal shielding plate, says 1969 body, 1969 neck, with a complete and really cool, and makes this guitar more valuable, 1957 wiring harness and pickup setup.
Yep.
What do you think?
I think so too.
Eric, how
I
about
think it's
you?
amazing. Yeah, that's kind of what, there's a magical charm when you put those two things together. I could kind of hear it and feel it when I was playing, how the electronics were reacting. It's not quite as bright as a late 60s guitar would have been.
It definitely sounded awesome, and a happy accident, because if there are going to be changes, when you mix a later era CBS Strat with an earlier pickup harness and setup, does it sound better? I think most people would probably say, yeah, it probably is going to sound better. It certainly sounds awesome, and it's a more valuable piece of the puzzle. And the fact that it's a 1957 wiring harness with a 1969 body and neck actually makes this instrument more valuable. In summation, I think we have a pretty good idea of what we're looking at here. It's a 1969 body with a 1969 neck and a 1957, a complete 1957 wiring harness to include pickups, potentiometers, with an added 5-way switch from later on, probably in the 80s. The other thing we noticed as we were looking at the guitar is that the neck plate, where the serial number is, also matches 1957 serial numbers. We know that because it has a dash or a minus sign before the actual numbers, which helps us with our determining that that is probably an original 1957 setup as far as electronics go, which helps us in determining that that is probably a legitimate 1957 wiring harness and pickups. So I think we feel really solid about what this guitar is Ready to put it back together for us, David?
Yep.
We have a really famous hybrid guitar, if you will, and here at Guitar Center Hollywood. It's Eric Clapton's Black Stratocaster, which is famously similar to this, where the neck and the body are from a different guitar, and the electronic harness is from a third guitar. He famously did that in the late 60s, early 70s. I think he had 3 or 4 Stratocasters, and he was constantly swapping necks and bodies and electronics to get that sort of magic appeal out of the guitar. So that's what's
Indeed.
interesting about this. It's similar to that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the many things that are just frankly genius about Clarence Fender, and that is that he made these guitars to be able to do just that. These were made for people to use on the road, gigging 200 or 300 times a year in some cases. And if something went wrong on the road, you give a call to the Fender factory and they'll ship you out a new neck. They'll send you a new wiring harness. And just one of the many things that are cool about Fender guitars in general. All righty. So that was cool. And we do it all day, every day. And that's basically exactly what happens when we look at not just Stratocasters, but vintage guitars that walk into our guitar centers around the country. This one had some really cool stories to tell. We have lots of guitars that have no stories other than this is an original 1956 Stratocaster, 1952 Les Paul. This particular one sounds awesome. So hope that was helpful. Thank you guys so much for your help with digging into this super cool 1969 with some 57 vibe Fender Stratocaster. If you'd like to learn even more about the history of vintage Fender Stratocasters and how to best inform yourself when you're rolling into a guitar center and looking for a vintage guitar, check out the links that are in the description. All kinds of cool stuff. I'm going to hand this back to Eric to play us out.